Hello and welcome to the hardest game. My name's Ben Doughty, and I'm delighted to be joined tonight by former pro middleweight, one-time opponent of the legendary Roberto Duran, Mike Culbert. Welcome, sir.
Oh, great to be here, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Well, like I say, it's a pleasure, and I think it's long overdue because we've been talking for a while. I used to see your name, because you've got the rather prominent profile picture of you in your fight in prime, the black and white with the southpaw stance, and I used to see you on other popular boxing-related pages, accounts, talking, and I thought, who is this guy? He looked like he was an ex-pro of some description. And then I obviously became aware of the fact you fought Roberto Duran, and you would talk about that sometimes. That's become, I suppose, your defining legacy in the ring. But where did it start for you? I'm aware that you were born in Carrickfergus, which is near Belfast, but I think you moved there at like 2 years of age from a toddler over to the Massachusetts. Is that correct?
Yes, 2.5. I moved to Massachusetts. I moved to Brockton when I was 4.
Okay, so basically you're a Brocktonian. You've never known anything different than the Brockton culture, which is...
Well, I did go back to Ireland and have a fight with the Irish team against England when I was 18.
Okay, so we're talking, what year would that have been?
84.
84, which was like the Los Angeles Olympic year.
Yeah, I was with the Olympic team, and we fought against a selection, an ABA selection.
Do you remember any of the English boxers that were on that particular show, all the Irish lads?
I remember Brian Roach, who beat me.
Yeah, okay.
He stopped me.
What was the story behind you winding up in the gym in Brockton and becoming an amateur boxer initially?
It's really kind of a funny story because Marvin. I went to the gym with a bunch of friends right before Marvin had won the championship, Marvin Hagler, and they all ended up quitting, and I just kept going. And one of them actually came back about 10 years later and was on the Contender show. It was a show we had in the States. They had young fighters that would come in and yeah. I don't know if you had it over where
yeah,
you.
We had it. We even had a UK versus USA version. But
I remember that. Oh yes, yeah.
Sugar Ray Leonard was involved, right. And Stallone was involved.
Stallone, yes. So one of my friends was on that show after he had stopped boxing for about 10 years. He came back, and he had a decent pro career. I just, in a city like Brockton, when at that time, most kids tried to do some boxing. It's just that Marvin was so popular.
So were you directly inspired by Marvin Hagler winning the World Middleweight Championship against Alan Minter in 1980?
No, I was actually a fan of the sport for a few years before that. I was probably about 10 or 11 when I really started watching boxing. And, Duran became first, of course, Muhammad Ali was my favorite. And then my gym teacher had told me one night on a primetime Friday night, George Foreman was fighting Dino Dennis. And my gym teacher said, I'd talked to him. I knew he was a boxing fan. And he said, well, who cares about those guys? Roberto Duran's fighting tonight. And I was like, I don't know. Who's that? And he goes, you'll see. And Duran fought Overo Rojas and knocked him out in the first round. And he was my favorite fighter from that moment on.
Which is very, it's fascinating and very romantic to contemplate that you'd fallen for Duran so many years before you saw him in the opposite corner. I don't want to talk about that yet because we'll build to that. But I'm just trying to imagine how that must have felt for you. So did you start at the Petronellis gym initially?
Yeah, that's the only. Yeah, I fooled around with my friends, and like every kid did. You don't know what you're doing, but
yeah.
I did a lot of that. Kids from school, would come down to my basement and I'd box. I got myself a pair of Everlast shorts. So it made me look like a boxer. And I actually, when I did start to box, I wore them for a couple of fights. And, then you learn how much you don't know, once you start. And I mean, Pat and Goody were busy with more important, they had a trainer that took care of the kids. And he did. Now that I'm older and I done it for so long, I realized this guy didn't really know much, but kids just came and went, and I stuck with it. I wasn't really dedicated in the beginning, but eventually I just started, sparring every night, and that's how you get better.
You know, and was Marvin Hagler, for instance, training constantly, coming in and out all the time, and preparing for fights and having camps while your amateur education was ongoing? Was he always around?
He was around more in the beginning. After he fought Duran, that's when we seen him less, because then he became it all. And I always tell people all the time, that's when it changed. After he beat Duran, he went from being a local celebrity to being a worldwide celebrity, and
Yeah.
he wasn't like, they moved the training camp from for most of his fights, instead of being in Provincetown where they always were, they would be at, in Palm Springs in California. So
Yeah, because Marvin used to train at Cape Cod. Is
yeah,
that
that's
correct?
right. He did until he hit the big time. Then they were all. I think all his training camps were in Palm Springs.
And I think it was Luis Marciano who told me that Marvin would lock himself away in it was like a disused hotel. It was like defunct, like you might see in a haunted horror
Yeah,
movie.
I've been there. Yeah, we went.
Yeah.
I went to pick up me and another pro, Brian. Well, neither one was a pro at the time. Brian Powers. We would pick up sparring partners, bring them back to Brockton or bring them to P Town, to bring them from Marvin to spar. So yeah, it was on the tip of Provincetown.
Yeah, and it was a kind of place where you could really get away from everything,
Oh,
I imagine, and just focus on the fight ahead of you.
that's what he did. He would. The only time I've ever seen him leave that was when his daughter was born in 1982. He was getting ready to fight Mickey Goodwin from a Kronk gym.
Yeah, the only white guy in the Kronk gym at the time,
Yeah,
I believe.
and then Goodwin had to pull out, so he ended up fighting Caveman Lee, and they drove him from camp to see his new daughter, and then he went back to camp the next day, and he took care of Lee in one round anyway.
He did, yeah. I mean, it was Caveman Lee had a reputation as a really bad dude,
Yeah,
He
he's
was
a big puncher and probably a tough street guy,
yeah, because he'd been in jail. I remember reading an article about him in Boxing News, and it said when he was training in jail, wherever he was, for whatever reason, it said he knocked the heavy bag off like 3 times in the gym, which I guess, like you say, that's a typical tough man reputation stuff, isn't it? Which perhaps is kind of meaningless when you're fighting one of the greatest, most ambidextrous, versatile middleweights in history.
Yeah. He was no match for Marvin. And I think that was the time. I think that Marvin changed his name. They were calling him Marvin Hagler, and he said, "It's Marvelous Marvin." And they said, "You want it?" He goes, "You call Sugar Ray Leonard Sugar Ray, call me Marvelous Marvin." They said, "You want your name called Marvelous Marvin? You got to go and change it legally," and he did.
Do you think he did have a chip on his shoulder? It was always been portrayed that Marvin carried this burning resentment with him about the way he was treated by the media and the public in general at one point, and the fact that he resented Sugar Ray Leonard in particular, who he felt had this easier passage towards stardom and popularity. Did you think he had that, or was he?
Oh, I definitely had that. I've
Yeah,
seen him be mean to people in the gym. He was never mean to me. He always treated me very well. I was a kid, but he
yeah,
still had to hit the speed bag. He gave me a pair of shorts.
yeah.
He was always, maybe because I was a southpaw. I had him, he was also, other younger fighters he was always good with. But he was like a regular guy. Like, he didn't walk in there with that he was the king. He was the king. We all knew it, but he
But he
didn't.
didn't behave like that.
He didn't act like that. It's really sad that he's gone, because, he meant so much to me. He really did.
It didn't make any sense, did it, Mike? The way it's happened now, he's gone, but
Yeah.
there just seems to be so little closure and so little kind of proper procedure, because the way it was like no cause of death,
Yeah.
and his wife Kay just seems to be very kind of like, well, I'm the only one who really knows what happens. My baby was with me, and thank you all, but please don't intrude, and forget about it. It was a little.
She doesn't get along. She doesn't get along with his family.
That's what I hear.
I was told by a family member what happened to him, and I don't tell people. He's gone, and that's how I look at it. It's sad.
Well, so obviously, I'm not gonna indiscreetly probe or put you in any position. But what you're saying to me and us right now, the people who are watching, you're saying that you do know exactly what happened, but it's not something that
I was told by a family member. Yes.
Okay. And it didn't feel right, and I know. I looked back through yours and my correspondence, and I remember I told you that we had this tiny little ad hoc memorial for him in Hyde Park in London, and not many people attended, to be honest with you. But one person who did was Daniel Aziz, the light heavyweight contender, former British European Commonwealth champion. And it was very touching that he made the effort to come because Hagler was his hero, and you could see. The shorts that Dan Aziz wears, they're always like Hagler tributes. You know the way Hagler would always have the either maroon, kind of
Yeah.
deep red slashed shorts, or the
The
turquoise and royal blue,
blue, yeah.
depending what mood he was in.
It's,
I don't know whether there was anything. I don't know if there was anything kind of mystical about that, depending what campaign he was looking to bring to the ring. But he definitely had. He alternated those shorts, didn't he? You know,
yep.
against Sibbo, he had the kind of like say maroonish
Yep.
shorts. Against Mugabe, he had the blue, and Hearns he had the blue and lighter blue. Was there any science behind that, by the way, or any thinking, or was it superstition or anything?
I don't think he just decided those were his colors and he's going to wear them. I think he preferred the maroon ones. He was a little bit superstitious. One thing Goody Petronelli had told me that he would not let anybody put a glove on before he did. So if, like, say, because he one fight, it was a big one too. Might have been Simpson. Someone came into the locker room and took the glove and put it on his hand, and Marvin got bent out of shape and told Goody, no, get other gloves. He didn't want anybody touching the glove. And I think the left one had to go on first. I think the left one had to go on first.
I've heard that before of fighters who have a hand that they favour that gets gloved up before the other one. Were you a natural southpaw? Talking of hands.
Well, it's funny because I originally wrote my left hand. I do more things with my left hand. I didn't know it was a southpaw until I started boxing. I'm kind of ambidextrous too.
Yeah.
Because I write with my right hand now. In the second grade, my teacher had me turn on. My penmanship was so bad that she had me start writing with my right hand.
Yeah.
And now both my hands, my penmanship's terrible with both hands. So, it
so
helps.
Equally good with both. Yeah.
About the same. If I'm doing anything where I need leverage, I use my left hand.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably stronger.
And you fought Micky Ward 3 times in the amateurs.
Right.
I just had a look at one of them, which I think is the only one that's in the public domain on YouTube. I don't know which order it was. Maybe you can tell me which
the third
one.
One.
The third fight, right?
The third fight. I deserved the decision in that fight.
Yeah. And how did he get all 3 decisions?
He did. And the funny thing about the first time I fought him, he'd already been to the national tournament. I was still a novice. But I had complained that I wasn't in a tournament, and the reason why they didn't, it was called the New England AAU tournament, and it's held every year in Dorchester. It's more popular than the Golden Gloves in this area at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And, on the way there, we get to the thing, and Tony Petronelli took care of the amateurs with a guy named Pitt Perrin, and they said, "Oh, you're not in the tournament," and I was bent out of shape, and Tony ended up slapping me in the face. The reason why I wasn't in the tournament is because Vinny Paz was in there, and he was the number 1 rated 132 pounder in the country. Yeah, so by the next week, Pazienza doesn't show up. He was, I think, with the U.S. team fighting against East Germany. So then the semifinals came around. A fighter had pulled out, and Tony said, "Hey, you said you wanted to be in this tournament." He said, "Now's your chance. You can fight this guy." And I knew who his brother was because his brother had fought Sugar Ray Leonard, Dick Eklund. I didn't know about Ward. And then someone said, no, he was he went to the Nationals. He won the Golden Gloves in Lowell early in the year. So I knew I was in with, and I didn't do much. I honestly, but the thing is, he didn't do much either. Probably because of the gym I was from, he probably expected me to be better than I was. And he got a decision, and he deserved it. The second time we fought, same tournament, semifinals, I had won 18 fights in a row. I won the New England Novice Championship, and I won another tournament, and I'd see Ward at shows, and I would say to him, I'd say, "I can't wait to fight you again." And he came out strong in the first round, and I hit him with a straight left hand coming in. I have a video of this, but I have nothing to play it on. It's on the DVD, and he falls forward and his gloves touch the ground. The referee sends me to the neutral corner and starts counting. And then he stops counting and wipes his gloves off. And I'm like, was that? So, and then I look at Ward, and Ward, like when we went to face each other again, Ward had a bloody nose. So I didn't know I caught him. It should have been called a knockdown. I don't know if officially was. It really doesn't make any difference. And so I won that. The second round was close. Could have went either way. The third round, about a minute left. The referee, we were in a clinch, and the referee said break. And in the amateurs, you're supposed to keep your hands high and take a step back. I kept my hands up and took a step back, and Ward took a step forward and hit me with the left hook to the body, the one he's famous for now. And it caught me in the ribs, and I'd never felt pain like that before. So when I was a kid, when I get caught with a good punch, and I would stick my tongue out at the person. And I learned my lesson that day not to do that anymore, because I stuck my tongue out at Ward, and he hit me with a left uppercut while my tongue was out.
Right, so you bit your tongue.
Oh, yeah. And if it wasn't for the mouthpiece, I had a big block mouthpiece in there. If it wasn't for that, the tongue would have come off, I think. And he got that decision. I got hurt in that last round. I thought he deserved it. I could have gotten it. And then the third fight, the one you've seen, again, the semifinals, he was going to fight another guy. That guy didn't want to fight him because at this point, Ward had a real big reputation. And I had my own reputation. And it was my first fight from coming from Ireland. I had fought in Ireland on June 1st of 84. And this fight was on September 27th of 84. And Ward, you watch it on YouTube. I deserve to win, in my opinion. I outworked him, and I tried a different approach. Instead of my regular, boxing and moving and using my jab and trying to counter off of him, I just became the aggressor. And I think I was more aggressive than he was and deserved the decision. So,
interesting thing about that bout that I watched was that you were wearing head guards but not vests, which is it's unusual for two reasons. I mean, head guards have been knocking around since the 70s. I'd see sometimes in American boxing. And they had him in the 1984 Olympics internationally, and that was mandated for a very long time. But vests was always the symbol of being an amateur as opposed to professional, whereas you guys were wearing headgear but bare-chested, which struck me as different anyway. It's probably not particularly significant, but I am an anorak, so I tend to pick up on random stuff like that.
People ask me that a lot about that fight. They go, "Why weren't you guys wearing t-shirts?" And I'm like, "You didn't have to." I fought with them on. And then they made it mandatory in the U.S. The amateurs now have to wear them. But I don't know.
If you go way back, Sugar Ray Robinson and young Cassius Clay, they didn't wear them. They didn't have to. Or Floyd Patterson, they're all bare-chested. They look like pros.
I think some states you had to, and other states they didn't really care. I do know that the headgear rule was 84, because when I did go to fight for Ireland, I came in the ring with my headgear on, and they made me take it off.
Yeah.
And I'd probably fought 3 times before that with no headgear, but I'm against limited, opposition.
Did you prefer? What was your feeling about boxing with head guards? You prefer it with or without?
It's been so long since I wore one in a fight. I don't really remember. I did prefer to wear them for headbutts and different things. Like I never sparred without a headgear. I see guys sparring not wearing headgear, and I think that's a mistake.
Young Mike Tyson would often spar without headgear because they believed it was better for his defense and better for his head movement and slipping punches and all the other things. So you'll often see classic footage of Iron Mike sparring up at Catskills, and he's got a big opponent with a head guard on, and he's notable for the fact he's not wearing one. So
even the one when he did wear one, it was small, and that's what I preferred. The one, if you watch that fight, the headgear I'm wearing is very, it has padding here.
Yeah,
that's it. Like it's not like there's nothing on the sides.
Yeah. Did you forge a friendship with Micky Ward? And are you guys
we're friendly enough? Yes.
Yeah. So can I ask you, what did you make of the movie back in the day, The Fighter, which portrayed him and obviously his brother Dickie Eklund? Did you like it?
I did. I think it was a good movie. I was surprised the movie was as good as it was. I mean, he
captured the essence.
He's got an interesting past. His sisters. I met one sister the second fight I fought him, and he's got an interesting past, and they brought it out. I actually thought I had sent him a video of our last 2 fights, DVD of our last 2 fights, and before they started making the movie, and I honestly thought that I was going to be in the movie, that they would show some footage of one of us, but didn't happen. So.
I remember he said at the time when being interviewed, it was probably Boxing News again, and he said, my family don't like it, some of them. He said, but I like it. He said, and it's my movie, because I guess the family probably didn't like it because it wasn't the most flattering portrayal of them.
I think from what I remember reading, he has 7 sisters, and 4 of them or 5 of them walked out when they showed them the movie before it was put.
Yeah.
It doesn't portray Dick, and I read something recently. I don't know if Mickey said it or not, but it doesn't portray Dick in a very good light.
No, and yet I think Christian Bale was absolutely
great job. Great job.
He was hailed for that role because they said it was spooky the way he'd actually captured Dickie in so many ways.
I tell people Eckler's crazier than they make him out in the movie. Like he's a funny guy. He comes up with some funny stuff. He's done some crazy things. I'm not a fan of Wahlberg's.
No,
he's
in
not.
General.
I don't think he's a good actor, and I know some things about him because he is from the area, and I'm not really a fan of his. So
no. So you turned pro in 1988.
Yep.
I believe it was in. I think it was in the Boston Garden. I believe your debut.
That was it. Yep.
Was it Goody and Pat straight away from the off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to me was I fought in the Golden Gloves on Lowell, and luckily these fights were on Nesson. It's the New England Sports Network. They show the Bruins, they show the Red Sox, and they showed the Golden Gloves a few years in a row. And I won the New England Golden Gloves in '87, and then in '88. I went to the Nationals in '87. I kind of acted up a little bit. I'll leave it at that. And then in '88, I fought the same guy in the finals, a good young fighter from Vermont. Unfortunately, he died in a motorcycle accident years later. But I beat him easily. No question about it. The Tom McNeely, former heavyweight contender, and the other commentator, Culbert won this easy. He should do really well at the Nationals. And they gave the decision to the guy, Jeff Beliveau. They gave the decision to Beliveau. And everybody's seen it. The crowd started booing, and it was bad. Later in the night, John Scully, who I think you're friends with.
Indeed, I am, yeah. I was going to ask you about him.
Yeah, John was in a brawl with the kid from South Boston, Joey DeGrandis. And I don't know if you ever heard this story. The whole place just became a mob scene. Like they were throwing things into the ring, and because DeGrandis got disqualified against Scully. But back to mine, the crowd was kind of mellow, and then after my fight, it got kind of rowdy because the decision was that bad. So I was done. I was like, you know what? This sport isn't giving me anything. But you're stealing fights like that from me. I don't deserve that, and I'm not going to do this anymore. But I did tell Steve Collins that I would get him ready to fight Sammy Story for the Irish title in the Boston Garden. So I was sparring with Collins, and Brian Powers was on the undercard, and Brian got hurt, and Goody, we were the same weight. Brian and Goody come up to me and said, "Hey, do you want to turn pro?" And I said, "Well, give me till tomorrow, and I'll let you know tomorrow." And by the end of the workout, I was like, "You know what? Yeah, I will." And that fight was on Nesson, and it was a dream to fight at the Boston Garden for your first pro fight.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know Brian Powers, incidentally, one fight he is desperate to get hold of, and he's never been able to track down. He boxed on the undercard of the Marvin Hagler Sugar Ray Leonard fight, April 6, 1987, at Caesars, and he was the opening fight, a 4-rounder, and he can't for the life of him seem to find a copy, even though somebody must have it somewhere. Yeah.
He was the opener for that, and he was the opener for the year before when Tommy Hearns fought Mark Medell and Roberto Duran fought.
The triple hitter, Barry McGuigan and Steve Cruz. And,
great fight. Tough night, though, to watch. When I'm watching friends of mine fight Duran, it's tough.
Well, because the funny thing is, I know that you're one of those people who believes that Duran wouldn't have always lost to Hearns, and you can foresee a scenario at different points in their careers when you can envisage a Duran win, which we've spoke about it before. That's not something not a view I subscribe to, but I understand it was it was going to be a hard thing to watch that and other losses that Roberto had.
Yeah, William Joppy loss wasn't easy, and I envisioned it. That's the only way I can explain it, because after I fought him, I could see I'm just missing him, and I'm thinking, you know what? There's a sharper fighter out there. When he fights him, he's going to getting caught with these punches I'm missing him with, and that's what happened. And 2 years later, Joppy took him apart. He shouldn't have been in there with William Joppy at 47. So
no, that was pretty tragic. When you think of these sacrificial lamb fights of all-time greats, obviously people think of Muhammad Ali and Larry Holmes. That's probably the ultimate example. If you want to run it back a bit further, you've got Joe Louis and Rocky Marciano. And I think Duran Joppy is in that kind of category of unconscionable, unpalatable situations where you just wish it hadn't happened. And because some people think that Hagler, not that he went easy on Duran, that he approached it with a cerebral mindset rather than a violent, destructive one, because of the respect he had for Roberto's legacy, and because that's the way he wanted to approach the legend of Duran. Do you think it's
Well,
true?
I think if Marvin could have got him out of there, he would have. But they didn't expect Duran to box. They didn't expect Duran to fight the way he did. They thought he was going to come after him like Davey Moore. So when that didn't
Yeah.
happen, Marvin go down, sit down, and Goody would tell him and go, you know what? He's setting a trap. He's going to come after you. He's setting a trap. He wants you to come in, and he's going to start to get aggressive. And he just didn't. He just laid back. I thought Marvin won bigger than the scorecards. I mean, I think.
So do I. I honestly, Mike, I think it was like a 10-5 kind of
Yeah,
situation.
exactly.
The whole idea, you know, of people who say, oh, Duran was winning that fight after 12 rounds. If it'd been a 12-round fight, he would have won it. It's like, that would have been an absolute travesty. And when I've sat with Roberto and interviewed him live on stage in London only a few years ago, about 6 years ago. And when he sits there telling, you know, an obviously very pro Roberto Duran crowd, that he beat Hagler really, but it was politics, and because, you know, they didn't want him to have the undisputed middleweight championship, and they wanted Hagler to fight Tommy Hearns and etc. etc. Obviously, it's hard to listen to that. It helps the fact he speaks Spanish, so I don't have to hear it firsthand. I get it filtered through his son, the interpreter. And you know, you pick your battles. You don't make a big thing of it on a night like that and say, no, Roberto, that's complete bollocks. I'm sorry. You just don't do it. But Hagler definitely won that fight quite handily. It's a beautiful fight, though. You know,
A lot of skill.
Technically it's a lovely fight. But
the thing is, we didn't have a big gym. It wasn't like the Kronk gym. We all knew each other. We were all friendly. Like I said, Marvin was there. Marvin was the king. We all knew that. And Marvin comes in, and we're all in the changing room, and he's in areas, and the first day back, and I don't think he was working out. I think he just came in to see us, and we're clapping, and he starts saying, "Man, that guy was so hard to hit clean. I couldn't catch him clean." And then he's saying Duran was trying to thumb him, which I think in between one of the rounds, he tells that to Goody and Pat. He's trying to thumb me. He's trying to thumb me like he did to Davey Moore.
Yeah.
And he said that. And we're like, oh wow. And then I didn't even think of that, like how hard Duran was to hit clean. Like, you hear about guys' defenses, but you don't know until you get in there. And then I think in the second round of my fight with Duran, I'm missing him. Like, I don't know, he's standing right in front of me, but I'm still missing him. And I had fast hands. And then I started thinking of what Marvin said 13 years before. The guy just isn't.
Yeah, it came back to you. It's funny, isn't it, in the ring? I've never fought Roberto Duran, but it is funny in the ring. Sometimes things do come to you suddenly, things that you may have discussed with somebody. Most of the time you're locked in, and it's all a little bit surreal, and it's not like normal existence. But sometimes things come into your brain, literally, that somebody said to you, or just some random detail while you're trying to deal with what's in front of you. It's
exactly what happened.
But so go on then. Obviously, your career is defined by the fact that you boxed Roberto Duran, and that you were actually his last stoppage victim. How do you feel about that defining your professional boxing legacy when you consider that you won 30 out of 35 professional fights and were a handy operator yourself? How do you feel being remembered for that?
I'm proud of it. It sounds funny, but I'm proud of it. The guy was my hero. If it was someone else, I probably wouldn't be. I'm a fan of Hector Camacho's. I almost fought him about 5 different times.
Yeah.
If I was Camacho's last stoppage, I'd be proud of that too. I'm proud of it. And I got in there and I didn't quit. The guy beat me. I'm not the only. He knocked out 69 other people,
Yeah.
So
Bruce Guest, Boxing, Jazz and More, who tunes in every week, I've got to say, is very loyal to this show. And he did when it was Sugar, Silk and Stretch as well, because it used to be me, Michael Elijah, then Gary Stretch, but we kind of went solo for one reason or another. But Bruce has said, who is this guest? So just to reiterate, if Bruce has just arrived, this is former pro Michael Culbert from out of Massachusetts, Brockton, Massachusetts, fought Roberto Duran, compiled a highly respectable 34-1 log, boxed Micky Ward 3 times in the amateurs, has some fascinating insights, which he's been sharing with me while this has lasted, about Marvin Hagler and Steve Collins and the Petronellis. And we're just talking about how he feels about being Roberto Duran's last stoppage victim. How did the fight come about, Mike? When did you first hear about it? And when did they say to you, do you want to fight Roberto Duran in West Virginia?
It was, my name came up a couple of different times, and I fought. I've had 5 friends that have fought him, and I always tell people they all did better than I did, because I think they all did. But my name came up to fight him. My manager was well known for one incident in a Mike Tyson fight. My manager at the time. The Petronellis had split up.
What, Vinny Vecchione?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, because and for anyone who doesn't remember that, when Peter McNeely fought, who was Vinny's man, fought Mike Tyson in his first post jail fight in 1985, sorry, 1995. He jumped in the ring and got his man disqualified, didn't he? So it wasn't technically a first round KO; it was a first round DQ win for Mike Tyson.
Right. Yeah, I think he saved Peter's life. Peter's a very good friend of mine, so I mean,
yeah,
he went out there and tried. Peter went out there and tried to win.
He ran at him like a lunatic. I mean, which it was never going to work, but there was there was honour in it, and not just that. I've never seen someone get stopped in the first round and look as jubilant as Peter did afterwards, like he just won 6 Olympics and the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world all in one night. Because he just felt, you know what, hell, I did it, man, like a firewalk. I ran at Mike Tyson and I tried to take him out, and he was absolutely buzzing, wasn't he?
He was, and he said he would try to. Like I tell people all the time, leading up to the fight, people say, "How's your buddy going to do with Tyson?" Now, I knew it wasn't going to go well, but I said he's going to fight as hard as he can for as long as he can, and he did do that. Like Bruce Seldon fought him a year later,
jumped on the floor
and got 10 times what Peter got paid, and got punched in the shoulder and went down and pretended like he was hurt. So,
imagine that. I mean, that's because that was it. Tyson fought Peter, then he came back, and then his next bout was Buster Mathis Jr.
Yep.
Then he slaughtered our own Frank Bruno in 3 rounds for a repeat win in that was March '96.
Yep.
And then after that, he Seldon jumped on the floor, and then obviously the Evander Holyfield fight, November the 9th, 1996, came around. But and the thing is, we talk about your legacy being defined by lost Roberto Duran. That is. You covered yourself in glory by any comparison to Bruce Seldon, who, when people mention his name, what do people think of, Michael? They think of him jumping on the floor against Mike. But there was a caption one time, and it said, "What are you doing? I haven't even hit you yet." That was Tyson, and Bruce on the floor said, "No, and you ain't going to get the chance neither." And that was kind of what it was, huh?
He was the heavyweight champion of the world. He WBA heavyweight champion. He should have went out there and tried it. I say to people, people get in with Tyson, they either try to win or they try to survive. Peter went out there and tried to win. He didn't try to survive, right? Seldon didn't try to do either. He went right out there and fear took him over,
I guess that's what it is. Sometimes there is such an aura around somebody, and there's almost this irrational fear because most fighters have been punched in the head before, or in the liver or the floating rib or whatever. And some fighters have been knocked down, some fighters have been knocked out. And well, if it happens, it happens. Especially when you're getting that kind of recompense for it, Michael. You know what I mean? It doesn't. But I suppose, some people think Michael Spinks froze, whereas he insists that he didn't. He said he came out to do his thing, and he just got overwhelmed. That was it. He said he definitely didn't bottle it, as it were. But
you wouldn't think Michael Spinks would freeze, but who knows? He's a great fighter. That's another one that's sad that people only think of Michael Spinks because of the Tyson fight. Michael Spinks is one of the greatest light heavyweights in history. He won a gold.
He could be numero uno. He might be the greatest.
Yeah.
But and you're right. And you know what? Pound for pound, I guess there's a very compelling argument to say he ranks as a greater fighter than Mike Tyson. Pound for pound.
He certainly does. He certainly does, in my opinion.
Okay, so and yeah, you're completely right. He is known for that fight alone amongst a certain audience. Obviously, people like yourself and me, we understand it. But to the greater audience that is alive, Michael Spinks is remembered for that 91-second capitulation. Which is a tragedy, isn't it? Whereas in Seldon's case, it's kind of his own fault.
Yeah.
I'm going to look at some of these comments from people. John Hughes says this is an awesome thread. Mike was born in Carrickfergus, which is 15 miles from my hometown of Larne. Kung Kao says he beat Kirtland Lang and Aaron Barkley. Well, look, I beg to differ that Duran lost to Kirtland Lang, and rightly so. I mean, Kirtland Lang was a brilliant guy in his day, by the way. He was very temperamental and erratic, and he went missing after 2 years after he beat Duran. But Kirtland Lang beat Duran fair and square. Yep. Gary Rickards says he's really enjoying this podcast. Seldom is homeless now, isn't he, says Joe. He might be, which I'm sure myself and Michael would not wish that on him, even though we might be vitriolic about his non-performance against Mike Tyson. What else? Can you ask about sparring partners, please? Do you want me to ask Michael, presumably, about his sparring partners that guys that he sparred with, more notable guys?
I've sparred with, the first time I sparred with a top, sparred with world rated guys since I was about 16. World champions, Harry Arroyo,
Yeah,
Buster.
Youngstown, Ohio. Hiya,
Yeah,
Harry.
it was funny because he's fighting Robin Blake on national television, 1984, and I was in the middle of the Golden Gloves, and I was the closest thing to Robin Blake. I don't know if you remember him, southpaw from Texas.
Of course I do. Rockin'
Yeah,
Robin, yeah.
Rockin' Robin. Yeah. So I worked with Arroyo for about 2 weeks, and then he beat Blake in the next fight. He won the world title.
Yeah,
But
the IBF.
I never boxed Marvin. Never did. The only time I almost did was for the second fight with Hampshire. He came in the gym. It must have been his first night in the gym, and he was probably going to box with all the southpaws in the gym because Hampshire was a southpaw.
Yeah.
And I think Pitt or Tony said, "Hey, get ready, Marvin. You're going to be boxing with Marvin tonight." Of course, I immediately get very nervous, because it's Marvin, and then he did other rounds with other fighters, and they said, "Oh, we don't need you tonight." And I was relieved and disappointed at the same time.
I can totally imagine that. You feel like you've had a reprieve, then you walk home maybe and you think, damn, I wish I'd done one round with Marvin tonight. And that would have been priceless.
41 years later, I still say, man, I wish I could have gone in with him. And I remember Brian Powers did one round with him, and Marvin said, "I'm going to wipe that smile off your face." And bit Brian with a jab, knocked him across the ring.
I always hear that Steve Collins always talks about the fact Marvin would never spar him. Yeah. And he said he didn't understand it until years later. What he says is, this is Steve's version. He said that he was young and cocky and wanted to prove himself, and he was champion at the bit. And Marvin always was like, nah, kid, nah. And then he says later on, there was a kind of similar version of his younger self in the gym when he was a world champion himself, Steve, and he was coming to the end of his career. And he says that he thought, if I get in with this kid who wants to prove himself, I'm going to batter him because that's the only thing I will be able to do to put him in his place. And he says he believes that's why Marvin never wanted to spar with him, because he didn't want to stick it on Steve, which he would have needed to have done.
Well, I've never seen him spar, and Marvin wasn't in the gym much when Steve got to us. Steve got to us. I think his first fight with the Petronellis was in August of '86. So after Marvin had fought Mugabe.
So he'd only have one more fight to go.
Yeah, he fought Leonard after that, but we didn't see him in the gym much. After like I said, it changed after the Hagler, after the Duran fight, and then he was in the gym less and less. And then I didn't see him at all between the Mugabe fight and the Leonard fight. He didn't come to the gym.
So there's a limit to how many times he can have refused or to spar with Steve or swerve sparring with Steve because he just wasn't there.
Yeah. I mean, I'd never seen him there. I mean, Collins was there every night. So, I was there every night. And the first time we sparred Steve originally, I think, went to Worcester before he moved to Boston area. Yeah. So he was in Goody come up to me and Powers. Now, me and Brian Powers sparred just about every day, unless we sparred other fighters. And he said, hey, can you fit this Irish guy in with you guys? And me and Brian are like, okay. So I think Brian did 2 rounds with him. And he was just a rough character. You didn't know what you were going to get hit with. His shoulder, his head, his elbow. I think a couple of knees might have gone in there. You just never know. It hit you low. It hit you in the back of the head. It's just rough, Yeah. And then I did my 2 rounds with him. Me and Brian did a couple rounds together. And that's how it was sparring with Steve in the beginning. Now, Goody took Steve. They seen something in Collins, and Goody worked with him and refined him and made him the fighter that he ended up being.
Yeah, polished that rough diamond. Bruce has asked, did you ever spar with any of the Rhode Island fighters like Paz and Manfredo?
Well, I beat one of the Manfredos. I never boxed with Peter. Yeah, I did beat Peter's uncle twice in the Golden Glove finals. Paz, I boxed once with Paz.
Yeah, how was that?
He was at the end of doing 6. And I think I was the last 2. I did the 2 or 4. Not a lot happened. I was just moving and boxing,
It's a nice gig when you get to go in the end of some guy, because sometimes you can do quite well against a guy who's above you. I remember doing a few similar things at Gleason's against a few pros of some sort of note, and I do quite well because you went in for like the last 2 rounds when they'd done 8, and it was different than if you'd have been in their position, obviously.
Yeah, as long as you don't go out there with that, the attitude of like, I'm going to bang this. He's tired. I'm going to take it.
Yeah, he's gone. He's mine.
Yeah, because the next time he's going to say, you're going first.
Yeah, exactly that. A fella called Simply Delineated as Nickname says, were you able to make a living from boxing, or were you holding down a job down at the same time?
I always worked.
Yeah.
I could have. I got offered a few times. Do you want to just fight and we'll back you? But in my way of thinking was, I was younger, of course. You know, I like to go out and have a good time when I'm not training. But I would have felt wrong about that. It feels like, you know, someone's your boss. You know, because they're backing you. They're giving you money to train. So
yeah.
I never took any offers. I just worked.
And what about ticket selling back then in your era, which actually stretches quite a long time from 1988 to 2006? Well, because in this country now, unless you've got a TV back and a good deal or a good platform, then you have to sell your own tickets. Otherwise, you ain't getting on the show. You know, and half the time you might end up fighting for nothing. I know fighters who even almost paid out of their own pocket just to fight in the early days, just to try and get things moving with their career. So the nickname also asked, did you have to sell tickets yourself back in the day?
I did, but I always liked the deal, and I would usually get this in the Boston fights, where I'd get the deal where I would get a certain amount and then get tickets, you know, so I could.
Yeah, so they meet you halfway.
So I was getting 1,000, and this is in the mid '80s. Say I'm getting 1,000, and then 1,000 in tickets. Well, you know, some friends you're going to sell it to them for, you know, say the ticket's $30. You might give it to some friends for $20, or give them tickets. You know.
Yeah,
That's how I like doing it that way.
Yeah, which, you know what, that I reckon a lot of up and coming pros on the UK scene today, who are in the house corner, as we call it, you know, not the journeymen who are just accepting fights and going on the road. I'm sure a lot of them would welcome that, and that would sound like relative heaven. The fact they're getting a guaranteed purse and they've got a bit of leverage to decide how to market the other tickets they've been given. You know what I mean? That would at least be something.
Well, it was good because, you know, a lot of my friends, you know, Boston's, you know, 35 minutes from where I am right now. I'm in West Bridgewater. Now, a lot of my fights were in Whitman at the Whitman Armory. Those ones I just sold tickets to. You know, those I made my money selling tickets, but it was a small venue and it's right down the street. So I could sell 100 tickets, you know.
So you mentioned about you like to have a good time in between fights.
Right.
Now, something we've discussed before, and once again, it may be one of those areas where you may not be as completely candid about it as you would be if we were just talking face to face. But it was you, I think, that really told me that because Marvin Hagler was so dedicated and such a Spartan in training, one would automatically assume, with his whole no-nonsense persona, you wouldn't expect him to be a kind of guy who burned the candle at both ends and liked the drink and might have experimented with recreational drugs. But you tell me that perception is wrong. That's not the case, and that Marvin was a bit of a party animal and really did need to let loose in between fights. Yeah,
he did. Yep. I think he admits that in a book. There's a book coming out about Marvin. A friend of mine's writing it. It's. I don't know how much of that it'll cover. I actually told him. I said you might want to stay away from most of that. You know. But yeah, Marvin liked to party. You know, he did, and he earned it. You know.
Yeah.
I've had people give me a hard time when I say that. They're like, "Oh, you're gonna ruin it." You know, you're stepping on his reputation. I'm like, I'm not.
I don't think you are. I think you're painting a real picture of a man who was a legend. Sugar Ray Leonard has spoken about his own cocaine and alcohol use.
I think Leonard was a little worse than Marvin. He was a bigger star too, a bigger celebrity. But Goody Petronelli told me years ago. He said, "Look, it's all right to have a good time. You're young, just know when to draw the line." He said, "It worked for Marvin, and it can work for you." I didn't have Marvin.
So he said, by all means, go out and drink and have fun with your friends and chase the ladies or whatever, you know, if that's your thing.
Right. That's, you know, but draw the line when it's time to do your work, you know? So.
And the thing with Sugar Ray Leonard is he identifies as an addict, and he's in recovery now, and he's open about his recovery, and I think he still attends AA meetings and all the rest of it.
Right.
Whereas Marvin presumably was somebody who had everything in control and would do what he did in between fights, but those behaviours never really crossed the line and affected him in any detrimental way by the sound of it.
Nope, I didn't. He knew when it was time to work. To, you know what, stop all that and go to work. You know,
Did you have a party with Hagler?
I was at his daughter's christening, but I was young.
Yeah,
I think I've had a beer with him out at a bar once. You know, he was there. A friend of a friend. He was with her. And I sat down, had a beer with him. We talked. It was probably not long after his retirement. Yeah. And I was in one of my mini retirements. And he goes, "You miss it?" And I go, "Of course I miss it." And I go, "So do you?" And he goes, "Yep, I do." So he was
Did
a good
you?
guy. He was, he could be surly, I know, but he was a good guy.
Yeah, he was surly when I met him. I don't know if you heard the story, but I went looking for him in Milan just because I shouldn't have done it, but particularly knowing. I'll say knowing what I know now, I should have known it then, and I did know it then. But a friend of mine who was a bit of a wacky character said, I want to do an evening with Marvin Hagler in London. I can't find a number for his agent or anything like that. He's very reclusive. I say we just go to, he said, I figured out where he's living. It's called Piatello. I say we just go out there and we go find Hagler. And he says, your job, Ben, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is that if we find him, you talk to him, you pitch him, tell him you've already interviewed Duran and Sugar Ray and all the rest of it, and get him on that basis, hook him in. If we don't find him, then you've just got a free holiday. He said, I'll pay for everything. You will not spend a euro while we're out there. So I went with him just on that premise because I had a week, quite a quiet week, and I said, all right. We went on a Monday, we came back on a Wednesday. Oddly, we bumped into Donny Lalonde, who just happened to be there randomly, which is
Oh, wow.
you couldn't make it up. Because I was talking to Donny like yourself on Facebook for years, but we met because Donny was like, "What are you doing in Milan, man? I'm here." He said, "Let's have lunch." And you know what Donny was doing? He was there to see a Bob Dylan concert because he used to train Dylan. Dylan was a personal training client of Donny Lalonde.
Oh, wow.
Just picture Bob Dylan hitting pads and Donny being like, "Okay, right hand, left hook, now roll." I mean that's right up there on the Richter scale of surreality.
Yeah, right.
But the point was, while we were out there, we were looking for Hagler, and I guess it's idiocy really. We were waving a picture of him and Kay around in a local laundromats, and then somebody at a local boxing gym said to us, "Marvin doesn't live in Piatello anymore. He lives in Roxana." So we went there, and because we filmed a little YouTube documentary, kind of mini documentary about the quest to find Hagler, he saw it somehow. I didn't think he would, but Marvin actually saw it. So fast forward 7 months, and somebody actually did get him to do an evening with Marvin Hagler or some UK dates, and it was in Bedford, in near Luton this evening. And I was queuing up for a photograph with him. And when I got there, we were talking, and I showed him a picture of him and Robbie Sims, the one where Robbie is wrapping Marvin's hands.
Right.
And I'd blown it up into a colour photograph for him, and I framed it, whatever. Said, "Oh, this is for you." And we got talking, and then suddenly his wife Kay came over and spoke to him, and she must have said to him, "That's that fucking limey that was was asking questions in Milan." So he suddenly changed and said, "Wait a second, what's your name?" And I told him my name, and he said, "Did you come looking for me in Milan?" And I said, "Yeah. What else could I say?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Why?" And that's when he pokes me in the chest, and I've got that photograph where they caught it at that moment. So, I saw the surly side of him, but if you obviously the guy, you can probably confirm in triplicate that what me and my friend did was particularly stupid.
Right. Yeah. I would. Yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't have done that. If I'd have known you then and you said you were going to do that, I would have told you, no, that's probably not a good idea.
And you know what? If I'd have known you then, I would have definitely run it by you because I don't think we knew each other in 2018. I don't think we did we?
No, I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't believe so.
7 years now, Joe. It is 7 years.
Yeah, exactly that. But
Yeah.
but I did see that side of him. So let's go back to Duran because I think we got sidetracked because there's so many interesting rivulets off of this conversation. You got the call to fight Duran. I mean, did you feel like it was like? Forgive me for using this reference, but Jim will fix it. We used to have a show here, which is now, unfortunately, the connotation has been ruined for certain reasons. But there was a show in the '70s called Jim will fix it, where he made kids' dreams come true. Is that how you felt when you got the fight?
Well, go back to what I was saying. So my name had come up to fight him a couple of times, and then finally it looked like I was going to fight him on February 20th of 1996, the year I did fight him. So I was going to fight him on February 20th. So I had 6 weeks to get ready for him. And he was fighting Hector Camacho. Him and Camacho were going to fight. I don't know what the date was. So I think he was using me as a tune-up because I'm a southpaw and I'm, fast. And Camacho was fighting a guy, Lopez, as his tune-up. On January 16th, on Tuesday night fights, Camacho gets butted. And I knew once I seen that Camacho was butted, I knew that would push back their fight. And I knew, I had a feeling that I wasn't going to be fighting Duran anymore. So I get called in the office, Vecchione says, "Yeah, you're not fighting Duran." Of course, I was heartbroken, I'm like, I ended up fighting on March 8th against another opponent. And then I had a couple more fights, one of which I kind of got screwed on. And then I would say it was 10 days before I fought him. Vinny called me and he goes, "Hey, do you want to fight Roberto Duran?" I said, "When?" And I had a fight coming up in 3 days. I said, "I got a fight in 3 days. When do you?" He goes, "It's in 10 days. It's a week after your fight." I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" He goes, "We're going to do them both." And I said, "All right, yeah, I'll fight him." And then, well, I was actually thinking about it. I said, "How much?" And he told me the price. I'm like, "That's kind of low." And then the other, Cliff Fippen, is the other trainer, pops it and goes, "Well, do you want to be famous? This is your chance." And that's pretty much all I needed. And I mean, it was him. So I was going to fight him. I would have wanted to get more money, but I think if I'd asked for more money, they would have got someone else.
I can imagine it was short money, but you thought, but you know what, you thought this would be a legacy, and regardless, it'd be an unbelievable experience.
And to be honest with you, I didn't think I was going to lose. I know
I was going to ask.
When he fought Demange, Ray Demange is the guy that took my fight in February. He looked terrible. He didn't, he came in, he was heavy. He didn't look good. But he fought Camacho 3 months later. He did look good. He deserved the decision. All right.
He should have beat Hector that night. He won
10 rounds out of 12. And Camacho wasn't at his best at that point either. We didn't, even though I had 10 days to get ready for him, I wasn't out partying. I was in the gym training because I was fighting someone else, but I wasn't fighting Duran, if you know what I mean. Like in my mind, to get up in the morning to run, I'm going my mind. They changed my opponent 3 times. I think some things were going on behind the scenes. So my opponent changed 3 times for the fight the week before I fought him. And then finally, I seen the contract the night that I fought. Vinny gave me the contract. I went in the bathroom. I read it. I think I broke down, cried a little, signed my name to it, gave it back to him, and fought Duran the next week. But I think they had me pegged as the opponent long before they asked me.
Yeah.
One thing I
wasn't going to ask, but one of our viewers has asked the kind of ballpark figure for fighting Duran. I'm only doing it because the fans have asked. I wasn't going to ask you how much money.
I don't tell people. I don't. It's.
No, I didn't think so. See, that was my journalistic instinct was saying don't ask. But what am I going to do? I got to sort of be faithful to these guys. What they say at least. It's that other comment underneath it is not especially relevant to what we're talking about. So I mean, I watched your fight again with Duran today. I've seen it before, and you were doing very nicely for 3 or 4 rounds, and then I think you did box one of the last really decent versions of Duran. And there was just something there's something at those levels still, isn't there? Even at that age of 45, the knockdown in the 5th round, which was the penultimate round of the fight, as it turned out. I think he hit you with what's an interesting combination. It seemed to be like a 1-2 left uppercut, then a double right hand that had actually nailed you.
He threw 2 right hands.
Yeah.
The first one got me, knocked me down. The second one missed. If you watch it, he throws 3 in a row.
Yeah.
Already on the floor by the 3rd one. But I hit him with a nice. Keep in mind, I only caught him clean, probably 4 or 5 times, like really good in the 6 rounds. Right before he dropped me, I hit him with a 1-2. You can't really tell from the camera angle that they show it, but I hit him with a nice 1-2 behind the ear, and he looked at me like, "How did you do that?" Like at that point he was picking up what I was doing, and he just gave me a funny look, like, "Wow, how did you do that?" And then he dropped me with the right hand later, a little bit later than that. I would say probably 20 seconds later. One thing I did do, and if you watch it again, watch the 4th round. We do a brief, we didn't exchange too often, a brief exchange where I hit him with a left uppercut and his head snaps up. I felt that all the way down to my elbow. Like I caught him clean enough that I could feel that all the way. And I'm like, and it didn't bother him at all. He's been hit by much harder punches than I am, and I wasn't a big puncher. And one thing years later, now that I've watched it so many times, I'm thinking, geez, I should have, threw a couple downstairs to his body. I don't think I hit him with 1 body punch the whole fight, and that's what the body shots that what killed me.
They're the ones that did you. Even though the first knockdown came from a headshot, it was the body shots that really debilitated you.
It was. Yeah. By the time, all right, so 4 rounds are done, and I'm not out of the fight. It's fairly close. I know Al Bernstein had him ahead 4-0. I think the judge had it closer. I was told the judges had it closer.
With due respect, I wouldn't cite Al Bernstein as the most knowledgeable source on the physical reality of boxing, personally.
The guy with him was a complete idiot.
Joe Pepper?
Yeah. But he very disrespectful at the end of that. You know, he said something like, "Well, the hands are still might not, but they used to be, but good enough to beat a Mike Culbert." And I took that as very offensive. You know, I wasn't.
Yeah.
He didn't. It didn't need to be said. You know,
Yeah.
and I out there in 10 days' notice and fought this guy, and you know they knew that. They knew it took the fight at the last minute. They did. He didn't need to throw that in there. But you're there, so.
How did you feel once the fight was done?
I thought I did better than I did until I came home and watched it on TV, and I'm like, wow, I didn't feel like I showed him too much respect, but when I watched it on TV, I felt like I did. Our game plan was pretty simple. Sean Fitzgerald had fought Duran 3 years before, and Sean was so fired up, he came out and he just let his hands go, and he was beaten. He was probably ahead. I've never seen the scorecards, but he was probably beating Duran, but he gassed himself out, and he got knocked out in the 6th round. You know, you might remember this. He went against the ropes and had his hands down. Roberto came across with the right hand and knocked him out.
Yeah.
So I actually boxed for some reason. Me and Sean were boxing 4 days before that fight. My style and Roberto's style is so very different. And Sean gets on the ropes and he's dropping his hands and I'm catching him. And I was a little quicker than Sean. And I said, Sean, you're getting the ropes against this guy. Don't, you got to keep your hands up. He goes, oh, yeah, I will. And that's what happened to him. You know, he dropped his hands, but he was exhausted. So me and Peter McNeely kind of put together what we're going to do is, and Peter would say, I always just stink a place out, which I did. You know, I could stay on the outside and just use my speed and against other guys. And that was kind of
cutie. In America, they call your style a cutie. Yeah. Right? They're used to.
So and that was kind of the idea. And then maybe like in the 4th round, maybe start coming forward a little bit and exchange with them a little bit more, you know, and that was the plan. But the body shots took that plan away because it just, And at first they didn't seem like they were doing much to me. Like I knew he was a great body puncher. I knew, but he's a 45 and he's 165 pounds, you know? So at first when I'm getting hit, I'm thinking, wow, these aren't so bad. I can handle this. I can handle those. And then they just added up. Now the second down, he hit me in the solar plexus.
Yeah, with the right hand.
Right there. It was a right uppercut, I think it was. Yeah, he hit me in the solar plexus, and I could not breathe. So I went down, and then he threw a couple more punches at me, and I kind of panicked because I couldn't breathe. So I just kind of flopped down again. And when I went down the second time in that round, I got up, and then I could breathe. But he finished me not long after that.
Was there a certain kind of moral victory in finishing the fight on your feet as the referee stopped it?
Yeah, I'm proud of that. You know, I mean,
it means a lot, particularly since you got off the deck to finish on your feet.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the thing was, as I'm standing in the neutral corner and the referee's counting, and I look and he's staring straight across. He's directly across from me, staring at me. And I knew at that point I was going to get my ass kicked. And I went out there and got my ass kicked. I didn't pack it in, and I just, you know, I try to hold him off. You know, it's funny if you watch it again and throw in the left uppercut because that was the punch that I hit him with a couple times pretty good. You know.
Yeah.
By that point, even if I caught him with it, it wouldn't have had enough power to back him off me. So,
one thing I found interesting a little while ago, we're talking about styles, and you said your style couldn't have been more different to Duran's.
Yeah.
I remember you saw when you and I linked up on social media, probably through Slugger O'Toole, Nick McBennett, and the Roberto Duran fan page, and all the rest of it. You saw me moving around with someone several years ago. Someone had posted a footage, and you said that you thought yours and my style was quite similar. You said you thought.
From a lefty, yeah, they were, yeah. At my best, that was my style. You know, I preferred a guy coming to me where I could, you know, hit, counter, move, hit, move. You know, that's me at my best. I wasn't like that my whole career. But, you know, by the time I got to 100, I probably shouldn't have been fighting as heavy as I was. I probably should have been fighting at 154, but I never really struggled to make weight.
You kind of look, even just looking at you in your prime, you look like a light middleweight more than a middleweight or a super middleweight.
Yeah,
definitely.
Exactly, yes. I mean, I was always big for my weight class up to, like, I was huge for 132 pounds, 139 pounds. I was big for 147 pounds. But then when I went up, I turned pro at 147, and then the other fighters were just bigger than me. You're going to see more 6-foot guys at 147 plus than you're going to see lighter than that, you know? And I was big. Like I was, you know, I'm not muscular, but I mean, I cut up enough that and I was tall, 5'11". So
yeah, you must have weighed in the same day a bunch of times, particularly starting in the late 80s.
Yep, we did. Yep.
Did you have some fights where you did the previous day thing?
Yep, some I did the night before, but usually in the smaller shows, you just weigh in right before the show starts.
So tell me, because there seems to be a disconnect here between boxing fans or even old school fighters and modern industry people, including boxers. Whereas the fans and the old school guys say, oh, it should all be on the same day. It's nonsense what they're doing now, rehydrating 2 or 3 divisions bigger than they weighed in the day before. And most people in the industry are like, no, it's much safer this way. And no way should we ever go back to. I mean, I know, I'll give you an example. Sam Noakes, who's a European lightweight champion currently,
Yep.
he says there's no way he would fight at lightweight if he had to make it on the day of a fight. He
Right.
just so to his whole way of thinking, it's completely alien at this point. What's your view of that, Mike?
Well, I think it should be the day before, but I think there should be a limitation.
Yeah, so you probably don't have a problem with the idea that Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, they're fighting at 160, so there's not a catch weight,
No.
but they have imposed a 10-pound rehydration limit on Eubank, the bigger guy. You don't have an issue with that?
No, I think that's how it should be.
Yeah, and the IBF indeed do have that stipulation for their championship fights anyway.
Right. Yeah, these guys coming in 25 pounds over what they weighed the night before. That shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. And it'll keep fighters from, when they do that, they struggle to make it, and then they come in and they put on the weight, they put on the 20 or 25 pounds. Maybe this will keep them, knowing they can only put on 10 pounds. Maybe it'll keep them in better shape between fights.
Yeah, and people say that about guys like David Benavidez, who obviously boxed last night and beat David Morrell, that they call them weight bullies. People say Canelo does it too.
I don't consider that. I don't think there's anything. I don't think that's a weight bully. I don't think that term means anything. Like if one guy's going to come in 20 pounds over, the other guy can too. So you're not a bully.
Yeah,
that's just my opinion.
The first example I remember, Mike, was it was when Joey Gamache fought Arturo Getty, and Joey was an honest to goodness like welter who weighed in at 140 and entered the ring about 145, which is kind of old school kind of calibration. And Getty, they said, was 160 on the night when he walked to the ring. And I remember Johnny Boss, who was, I think it was Joey Gamache's manager at the time, said, what are you going to do when you hear on the way to the ring that a guy's 160? You can't turn back and go head for the dressing room, But and obviously Joey got hurt in that fight. He sued the New York State Athletic Commission because I believe there was an allegation that Getty had never properly made the weight in the first place. But that was when I first became aware that somebody could get that much bigger. I didn't really note that or register that before that fight.
James Toney did it against Roy Jones, but it didn't work out in his favor. He put on 18 pounds, I think, between the weigh-in and then getting in the ring, and it didn't do him any good. Roy was just so much faster and more, athletically gifted.
Bob Arum, at one point when he became disgruntled with James Toney, who is obviously, James was a great fighter, and I think he's one of those great fighters that people can look at and think for all his wonderful achievements, he underachieved and could have done even better than he did. But Arum, when he became disgruntled with James, he said the guy has got a fucking eating disorder, is what he told Jackie Callan. He said that there was an issue with him, that he said it's not normal the way he eats and binges. That's an eating disorder,
Right, yeah. Well, he made it up to heavyweight and he was fighting as heavy as 240, so he probably true. He probably does, or did anyway.
Yeah. But I suppose that fighters are given to extreme behaviours of that nature because, like you say, some of them get addicted to drink and drugs or sex. Women. Right. I think Mike Tyson managed to be addicted to all those things. I don't know if he was ever. The only thing Mike didn't have was a gambling problem, and I know that because I don't know if you've read Mike Tyson's autobiography, Undisputed Truth, but when he got really bad on the cocaine and the liquor, his wife, Kiki, said to him, right, that's it. You're going to NA tonight. We're going to find an NA meeting. I'll go with you. Can't handle this anymore. Can't take it. You're going. And she finds what she thought was an NA meeting, and they get there, and they're a little bit late. And Tyson says he tries to enter as inconspicuously as he can, but it's quite difficult to do that when you're Mike Tyson, to enter any room, particularly a fellowship meeting, inconspicuously. So he shuffles in and sits down and apologizes for being late, and then he listens. And as he's listening to all the stories, he said it was all these people talking about gambling and how they lost all their money. And what he realised was that Kiki had accidentally brought him to a gambling anonymous meeting. and he felt it would be a bit rude just to walk out. So he listened for about 45 minutes and nodded as sympathetically as he could. And then at some point, when there was a bit of a lull in the sharing, he said, guys, I don't have a gambling problem. I thought this was NA. But honestly, God bless you guys. Been wonderful. And then left, apparently, which, if it's true, it's a great story, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I met Tyson once. He seemed like a nice guy. I met him long before he was famous. And he beat my stablemate Culbert Pierce in that tournament, the AAU tournament. The year Ward beat me. And you know, someone pointed out to him that's the one. Culbert Pierce was a top 10 world rated amateur after he lost to Tyson. So Culbert could fight.
Yeah. So we're just breaking up a bit there. I was getting towards the end of the show anyway, and I see Michael slightly breaking up there, which is yes, just breaking up a bit there, Michael. Which so we've been on for over an hour anyway. We can wrap this shortly. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry, you just froze for a bit there. I don't know if it was mine or yours that was going like that.
I think my probably on my end.
Yeah, maybe. Well, you know what? I've got to say, Michael, I'm not even just saying this. We've had some illustrious damn guests on this show, from the Sugar Silk and Stretch days to the Hardest Game incarnation more recently. And the way I feel now, anyway, I feel like this has been my favourite episode. I really mean that, because it's just been such an interesting conversation. And, you know, and I think I could talk to you for many, many hours about boxing.
Boxing, yeah, right. I think we could, yeah.
Absolutely, you know, and I think that I can see that the fans have enjoyed it too. But thanks so much for joining me with this. We'll get you back sometime, absolutely. And you know what? If I come to the East Coast anytime next year, which I may do, then it would be good to meet up. I was in Boston back in 2023, and next time I come anywhere near that neck of the woods, I'll be sure to give you a shout. Part 2, see David Evans, who is he's a whip for professional boxing in this country. He's a British Boxing Board of Control licensed whip. He's the guy that tells you, have you got your gloves on? Come on, you're on next, or it comes with collection gloves. He says that he wants a part 2. I'm down if you are, Michael. But
this was great. I'm actually going to probably ask you some advice. I am writing my own book. I know you've written some literature. I'm writing my own book, so I might be asking you for some advice.
Absolutely, come hit me up anytime. Hit me up anytime, and I'll tell you what I know about the whole process for sure.
Yeah.
And do you know what, as well? It's gone rather dark where you are at the minute. This will be the perfect time for you to come out with some really unthinkable revelation, because nobody would know it's you, and I could chop it up later, and it'd just be a silhouetted guy, like when somebody's giving information about the mafia, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for joining me on this show tonight. I've really enjoyed it, and I know I'm not the only one. But normally I could wrap the show and then we could have a little chat backstage. But the way StreamYard seems to have changed its protocols, as soon as I end the show, it just bounces us both out of it. So I'll probably just say thanks very much via inbox, Michael. But thank you so much, guys. Share this if you like the show. Press the subscribe button if you haven't already done it, although I'm sure most of you diehards have. One more time, let's give it up for Mike Culbert. Fine fella, fine fighter, and a top raconteur. Cheers.
Thank you.